Hi everyone, I'm Liam Eagle. I'm the editor here at the Web Host Industry Review, and I'd like to welcome you all to another of our webinars. Today's session is called Demystifying ICANN Accreditation, and it will feature a presentation by Tim Cole of ICANN and Sandeep Ramchandani from Logic Boxes, which is the sponsor of today's event. I'll introduce our two presenters more properly in a moment, but first I'd like to make a note of a few quick housekeeping type items. First off, questions. We'll definitely save some time at the end for a Q&A session, but you can feel free to submit your questions throughout using the function in the meeting software. I'll keep an eye on those throughout the presentation, and if there's anything that's really relevant to what's being discussed at the time, I'll try to find a polite point at which to bring it up. Otherwise, we will save it to the end. And I should also point out that we will have a record of all the questions asked. So if we get a ton of questions and we just don't have time at the end to address them all, we'll certainly have the opportunity to follow up with you after the fact. Secondly, regarding the slides, I spoke to Sandeep and Tim earlier, and they both said that they'd be happy to send the presentation slides over to anyone who requested them. Contact info for both presenters is going to be on screen during the Q&A period, so you can mark that down and follow up with them and get a hold of the slides if you want to look at them again. Of course, there will also be a video archive of the webinar available online at theword.com/webinars as of sort of early next week. Excuse me, it'll be there alongside a lot of our other great past webinars. So without further ado, I'll take you through a bit of an agenda, and we'll look at some of the things that we're going to touch on today. So first off, I'll give you a bit of an introduction to the presenters, and I'll let you know a bit more about the gentleman that you'll be listening to. Then I will get out of your hair, and they'll talk about the why, some of the reasoning and motivation around why a service provider might want to seek out ICANN accreditation. After that, we'll discuss what it actually takes to become accredited, what kind of requirements and qualifications your organization will have to meet, some of the financial responsibility involved, and a pretty detailed overview of the actual application process. You'll also get a bit of a financial analysis of, it gives you some hard numbers on how becoming a registrar can save you money in comparison to just reselling domains. And finally, we will discuss specifically how Logic Boxes can help service providers make their way through the accreditation process. Excuse me. So I guess, as with most presentations, it will wrap up with the conclusion. So I'm just going to skip over this introductory slide, which just brings us to the overview section. Before we go any further, we'll just take a look at the basic premise of today's presentation, which, as you can see on the slide, has to do with the myths surrounding ICANN accreditation, specifically relating to its feasibility, its value for web hosts and resellers, and generally its impact on the industry as a whole. Today we're going to try to demystify ICANN accreditation a little bit with the help of two of the best respected people in the field. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. Tim Cole is Chief Registrar Liaison for ICANN. In that capacity, he works in conjunction with the Director of Contract Compliance to review the operations of the GTLD domain name registrars. This involves promoting compliance with ICANN agreements and policies and partnering with them to assure smooth operations. He also oversees the new registrar and renewal accreditation process. Sandeep Ramchandani is a founding member of Logic Boxes. Sandeep has been instrumental in taking that business from conception to market leadership. He currently provides strategic direction and tactical assistance on all activities related to the company's growth and expansion. With more than 200 successful ICANN accreditations over 6 years, Sandeep is considered an expert in the subject. He's also known as an active participant in the GNSO registrar constituency, where he represents the interests of more than 80 registrar clients. I'm sorry, I didn't bring up his section of the slide there, but there's a quick overview of his. So while you look at that, I'm going to pass control of the presentation on to Sandeep, who will get right to the interesting stuff, and I will get out of your hair. So, Sandeep.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sorry, I'm just giving you control right now.
Sure, not a problem.
There you go.
Today's presentation. The first section that I'm going to be taking you guys through is giving you the reasons why hosting companies need to look at ICANN accreditation. It's a very valid question because hosting companies don't see domain names as a core part of their business, but I'm here to bring to you some specific reasons as to why an ICANN accreditation can actually play a pretty big part in your future plans. First and most obvious reason why you should be looking at an ICANN accreditation is because it enables you to buy domain names at base cost. Currently, if you are reselling domain names, you're actually buying it at about 10 to 40% higher than what you can buy it as a registrar, because obviously it has the registrar's margin loaded into the cost that you're paying. Overall, you'd end up saving anywhere between 15 to 20%, given that most of the registrations will be focused on common net. But if you notice .mobi, there's a 44% difference. And what we noticed is that a lot of the new GTLDs are actually sold at a much higher margin than some of the older ones. If that 15 to 20% isn't meaningful enough in terms of dollar value today, bear in mind that that number in terms of dollar amount savings is only going to increase exponentially as your domain volumes grow. As you can see here, your annual savings at 10,000 domain names works out to about $8,000, but at 30,000 domain names it increases to $35,000. So keep in mind that this number only increases as your volumes do. The next section, I'm going to be taking you through a very, very interesting advantage that's sort of made itself available over the last couple of years, which is registry sales promos. Now, a lot of registries today are offering very, very aggressive promos, as you can see. Some of them are actually offering domain names at deep discounts, as low as 25 cents or $1. And the logic behind it is pretty simple. They're looking to increase volumes as much as possible. You as a registrar have the option of either passing down this discount to your customers and resellers and also try and increase your domain registration volumes. But you could also simply absorb the extra margin that these discounts offer and increase the profits that you make off domain names. Registries also offer pretty generous marketing funds to registrars. Now, registries as of today cannot themselves go out there and solicit registrations from customers and resellers. So they partner with registrars and put a lot of money on the table for them to go out there and market the TLD along with the registrar. So you as a registrar would get a bounty amount from a registry using which you can go out there and market your brand name through whatever mediums and resources that are available to you, and together jointly grow the TLD as well as your business, could be domain names as well as hosting. Now, a very valid question is why a registry, being in a monopoly business, why do they need to really be so aggressive as far as sales promos are concerned? The reason is pretty straightforward. New GTLDs are around the corner. They're bound to happen sometime next year. So all the incumbent GTLD operators are trying to grab as much market share and mind share for the TLD until the point comes when new GTLDs come in and the space gets really, really crowded and competitive. Another interesting fact that everyone must keep in mind is that ICANN has a mandate called an equal access policy. Now that mandate ensures that every registry has to make each of their programs available to all ICANN accredited registrars, regardless of their domicile or size. So no registrar is really too small to take advantage of these promos. They have to be made available in the same way to every ICANN accredited registrar. So this is a great opportunity right now, and I can see it growing in focus over the next year until the new GTLDs come in. Domain parking. The concept is fairly simple. Every time a domain name goes into an inactive mode, it's basically expired or suspended, a registrar tends to park the domain name into a monetization page. Now, that page looks something like this, and as you can see, these pages are actually looking pretty interesting now. I mean, there was a time where they used to be pretty bland, but they have a lot of elements now. As you can see, a registrar can have his own logo on it. It also has a couple of options. If you're the existing customer's domain name, you can renew it. If you want this domain name, you can back order it. There's also a blurb here which actually showcases this registrar's products and services. But when this service actually was introduced, it was very controversial. And I think that was mainly because the parking companies and registrars at first introduced it, went overboard and was slightly greedy in the way they implemented it. But I think now the process has matured to a great extent. And I'd recommend anyone who's interested in monetizing this opportunity to partner with a parking company that is focused on monetizing registrar and hosting traffic. These companies would have had tons of experience working with several registrars from several countries, and they will help you implement this in the best possible way such that it does not cause any concern to your customers. And I'll also like to talk about the fact that there are many registrars today that are actually making more money off parking than of selling domain names. Smart parking. Resellers delete every domain name that the customers choose to not renew. What happens is that these domain names finally end up with drop catchers who then auction off these domain names. What registrars are doing today is that they're actually, at their own cost, renewing domain names that are actually making a decent amount through parking. So in their own account, they're actually going out there and renewing domain names themselves, and they continue to enjoy the monetization benefits that the parking service provides them. Again, this along with domain parking is something that can be implemented fairly easily for registrars, doesn't require much technical integration or effort on their side, and the parking company is instrumental in automating this process to a great extent. Next, we have transfer fulfillment. So let's say there are domain names that don't seem worth smart parking, but that doesn't mean that there isn't anyone else out there that sees value in those domain names. So what do you do with those domain names? You don't delete them. You actually send those lists out to auction houses who will then solicit bids for those domain names and see if they can run an auction of those domain names. Obviously, if the auction is successful, the registrar stands to make a decent cut of the revenue that's made off the auction. So just to put that into perspective, let's compare the way resellers treat an expiration versus the way registrars treat it. So reseller, when a domain name expired, there's a very straightforward and standardized process. You give the customer enough time to renew. If he doesn't renew it, it gets deleted, goes to available pool, and it inevitably will end up with an auction house. As opposed to that, the registrars have actually come up with a very, very creative model to monetize a domain name post-expiry. So once the domain name expires, it goes into traffic. If the customer renews the domain name, it obviously goes back to the customer. But if he doesn't renew the domain name, it gets smart parked. And if it is deemed to not be worthy of smart parking, you still have the opportunity of transfer fulfillment where you send a list of these domain names that have no use and see if there's someone out there, a domain or investor maybe, who sees some value in this domain name and wants to bid for it. So there are several ways in which registrars are actually milking the monetization opportunities of domain names. What you see in terms of savings of buying the domain names directly from the registries is only the beginning. A lot of the registrars' profits today are actually coming from these opportunities. All your registrars from whom you're buying are probably indulging these activities. The only difference is that they're seeing the profits of it while you're bringing in the domain names. The next section is talking about the increased marketability that an ICANN accreditation brings to your business. First of all, this is a generally accepted norm. Domain names are the entry point. When a customer wants to set up his website, he's much more likely to look for a domain name first before he goes shopping for a web hosting package. Now, if you're not a registrar or you don't have a compelling domain name proposition, the chances of him coming to you for a domain name are fairly small. He'll probably go to a registrar, and that registrar will have the first bite at the apple. He'll have the first opportunity to upsell hosting and other products to that customer. Target international markets. Now, ICANN accreditation has been looked upon as a springboard to actually take your business internationally because it is a globally accepted recognition. Build a reseller channel. Now, if you're a hosting company that's interested in targeting resellers, an ICANN accreditation can be pretty instrumental. You can use the ICANN accreditation to offer very, very compelling domain name program for resellers. Get them with a very, very disruptive pricing strategy for domain names. You'll see hundreds of resellers flocking to you. I've seen this work many times in the past very, very effectively. Once they come to you for the domain name program, you really have a huge captive base of resellers who are potential target for your wholesale web hosting program. Next, differentiation. I think in today's day and age, it's extremely important. The market is extremely cluttered and crowded. There are hundreds of thousands of resellers and hosting companies out there, but there are only a couple of hundred active ICANN accredited registrars in the world today. Consumer industry recognition. ICANN accredited logo does stand for stability and trust, especially in the minds of people that have high value domain name. The Fortune 500s of the world, the large companies, everyone's becoming more and more aware about the security concerns around the domain name, and they'd rather safeguard their domain names by keeping it with the registrar directly. Whois is also an important medium to actually showcase a registrar brand. Every one of your domain names today showcase your parent registrar's brand. You could easily replace that by your own registrar. Ultimate control and security. Currently, there are so many policies as far as the domain name program is concerned that's coming from the registrar. It could be the number of renewal grace days that you offer to your customers. It could be the pricing policy. It could be AUP. You are restricted by the policies that your registrar lays down as far as domain names are concerned. You could have the most sophisticated technologies in place to safeguard your customers' interests as far as domain name hijacking is concerned or unauthorized access is concerned. But if there's a breach at the registrar level, then that doesn't count at all. So you are really dependent on your registrar to protect your domain names and your customers. Consolidate your domain names. I see a lot of hosting companies and resellers having scattered their domain name portfolio across several reseller programs and several registrars. They might want to consider finding a permanent home for all their domain names under their own accreditation. Direct access and communication with the registries. Promo announcements, scheduled downtimes, even accessing all the registry API calls is an important function. Registrar API calls are actually a subset of the registry calls. You don't get access to everything as far as the domain name is concerned. But as a registrar, you would. Own your customers completely. I request everyone out there to spend some time and go through the reseller registrar agreement. You'll find that it's extremely one-sided, and it gives a lot of undue power to your registrar to actually, at their own discretion, take control of any domain name they please. I don't expect any registrar to actually exercise that right, but it's still, keep opening yourself to the possibility of a registrar actually taking over any of your domain names if the need arises. Treat VIP domains deservingly. Now, every registrar has actually built processes to automatically and efficiently handle a large volume of domain names. They're not able to differentiate between a domain name that belongs to a Fortune 500 company versus a domain name that belongs to a college graduate. But for you, each of these customers have to be treated very differently. They represent relationships, and as a registrar, you can give VIP domains the necessary treatment they deserve. With that, over to Tim Cole.
Guys, this might be a good moment for me to just interject with a question or two, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So Sandeep, I'm curious how you mentioned one of the benefits of introducing or becoming a registrar was the fact that it could introduce the possibility of operating a portfolio of domains that you sort of post expiry. Domains that your customer is allowed to expire, but you see some value in and operate them. Is that really feasible if we imagine that the person becoming a registrar is a web hosting company, for instance, or in this case, that's probably. I think in this case, that's probably a lot of what we're going to be talking about.
Sure.
Is that a really feasible extension of a hosting business?
It actually is, because it doesn't require any time or effort from the web hosting company or the registrar. Like I said, the parking company plays a very instrumental role. So, during expiration, when your domain name is parked, the parking company has a lot of data to analyze and suggest whether the domain name will actually end up making more money from parking than by spending towards a renewal. And as long as it's going to make a decent amount of money to cover the renewal cost, it can automatically send a call to you to not let the domain name expire or rather delete. So it's something that's completely automated, doesn't require any resources, and it's a fairly obvious thing to do. Because if the domain name is likely to cover more than the renewal cost, it makes sense for you to renew it at your own cost until such time a customer wants to take it back.
So it's not something that requires an investment of staff or time, really.
Absolutely not. I mean, all you need is a relationship with a strong parking provider.
Okay, and so one other quick question, I guess, is, and this is very general, very broad, but you know, the process you seem to be promoting or suggesting would presumably increase the number of accredited registrars out there, and obviously you said there's a fairly limited number in existence right now. Would a big increase in the number of registrars change the industry at all, or impact it in any really significant way?
I think that's a good question, but the fact of the matter is that I think there's more than sufficient room out there for more registrars. I mean, there are 200 million domain names out there, and 30% is actually with the top layer. I mean, that just goes to show that there's sufficient room for further fragmentation. There's definitely room for more registrars out there.
Okay. There were a couple of questions about the expired domain or you know, aftermarket type business, and they're pretty elaborate. So I think we're going to hold on to those till the end, and maybe we can just pass things on to Tim right now.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep and Liam. This is Tim Cole, and I want to take this opportunity to thank both LogicBoxes and WER for inviting me to participate in this webinar. I also need to do a bit of a brief disclaimer, which I hope you'll bear with me on, that while ICANN is the organization that accredits all GTLD registrars, that is generic top-level domains, we cannot particularly endorse or approve or disapprove of any of the different entities that are involved in this presentation, and so I just wanted to be clear that I'm here today to present information from ICANN's perspective, and we enjoy a good working relationship with LogicBoxes and with many other folks. So I just want that to be clear that while they asked me to speak here today, I'm not speaking in the capacity of LogicBoxes, primarily as a function of our outreach efforts. So I hope that as I present some of the information here about what it takes to become accredited, some of these aspects may be things that you will be required to do, or if you work with LogicBoxes, they may help you with. But I'm not going to distinguish between who does what so much as I'm going to talk about what ICANN looks for when an entity applies to become a registrar. And here we go. Okay, basically we have a policy that was adopted 10 years ago, or a little over 10 years ago, that set out the qualification requirements for becoming a registrar, and that policy hasn't really changed in those 10+ years. But just generally speaking, the policy consists of certain business requirements, and by those, you know, we're talking about being incorporated as in whatever. There may be different types of incorporations, and different countries may have different descriptions or names for that. But we do not accredit individuals or sole proprietors, so it does need to be a corporation of some sort. We also look at, you know, staffing, security, the capabilities in terms of your ability to perform as a registrar, what sort of backup systems, what kind of infrastructure will you be using, et cetera, et cetera. So we have an obligation to make sure that if we put our stamp of approval on a company, that they have, in fact, met certain requirements that we feel are satisfactory for functioning as a registrar, and that in that respect protects the registrants involved. As far as financial capabilities, we look at a few things, and primarily one of the requirements at the time of application is that you need to be able to demonstrate that you have available to you in some liquid form at least $70,000 US as to demonstrate your financial depth and capabilities. Now that simply needs to be in some liquid form. It could be a letter of credit, it could be cash in the bank, it could be other assets. It is not something you pay to ICANN. That's something I want to make clear. It's simply something you have to demonstrate to us that you have available. One other thing is that you do need to have a commercial general liability policy with a minimum of $500,000 per claim level of insurance. Those things are all explained more completely in our accreditation application pages and the application itself, and there will be links in this presentation to each of those. In addition, as Liam mentioned at the beginning, we are more than willing to make the slides available to you if you're interested in them. So once you become a registrar, or in order to become a registrar, there are a number of agreements that govern your role within the registrar domain, if you will. The first one, and the most important one from my perspective, is the Registrar Accreditation Agreement. And this is the contract between the registrar and ICANN that governs how you perform what you do for ICANN, what ICANN does for you. It dictates certain things that need to be in your registration agreement with your customers, as well as any agreement you may have with resellers. Next, you'll also have to enter into a registry-registrar agreement with each registry that you choose to do business with. In other words, if you are interested in offering common net registrations, you'll need to have a registry-registrar agreement with VeriSign. If you're interested in having .biz or .org or any number of the other TLDs, you'll need to have registry agreements with each of those registries. You also need to have a registrar-registrant agreement. So you need to have an agreement between you and the registrant. And this is something that I think sometimes people get a little confused about. But a registrar must have a contract with someone for each registration. So some people like to think they can go into business as a registrar and then own all of their own registrations. That's fine, but you need to have a separate entity that actually owns the registrations that you contract with. If applicable, you also would have a reseller agreement, and again, there are certain terms in the RAA, the first one above, that are required to be in the reseller agreement, and certain terms that are required to be in the registrar-registrant agreement. There are a number of consensus policies, and now this gets into the nuance of ICANN policy-making world, but in addition to your contract with us, on occasion, the organization, which is a bottom-up organization through its policy development process, will adopt certain policies that govern behavior. For example, that govern transfers between registrars, or it may govern certain who-is requirements, or certain UDRP dispute requirements and so forth. These consensus policies also apply when they're adopted to all registrars. You also will have a data escrow agreement. Once you start registering names, you'll be obligated to escrow the underlying registration information for your names. This is a safeguard in case you were to go out of business, or if something were to happen to your servers, et cetera, is that we have a backup of the information to protect the registrants. And again, here's the link for more details about these governing policies and agreements, and you feel free to follow up on that at a later date. I know everybody is interested in what it costs to become and to run a registrar, and so I'm going to specifically address the ICANN-related fees. In order to apply for an ICANN accreditation, there is an upfront one-time fee of $2,500 US. That has to be paid, and it's non-refundable. So when you apply, you need to put that down before we'll consider your application. It covers the costs of administering the application process. There is a yearly fee that every registrar pays, which has been set at $4,000 US, and that is collected in your first year upon approval of your accreditation, and then each year on your anniversary. However, the contract now does allow for After the first year, it allows for you to pay the $4,000 in quarterly installments. The quarterly variable fee, again, this is it's a flat dollar amount that's divided across all registrars, and at present, with the number of registrars that we have, this amounts to approximately $1,100 US per quarter. So that would be about $4,400 a year. For smaller registrars that are not active in drop pool activity, there is the option of a 2/3 reduction of that dollar amount as well. And for details on that, they're spelled out. The provisions for that are spelled out in the ICANN budget. And transaction fees, as you're probably well aware, every domain registration, every yearly increment, whether it be a new registration, a transfer, or a renewal, creates the obligation of a transaction fee, which is presently 18 cents per 1 year increment. And last but not least, this is not something that goes to ICANN. That's why I highlight it in red. But you also have to keep in mind that ICANN isn't the only place that fees will be paid. You'll obviously be paying fees to the registries for the domain names that you register with them. So upon application, I just want to briefly go over what some of the documentation you'll be required to provide includes. First of all, it's a completed application form that has to be completed, signed, and dated. There's a link there to what the form looks like. It's got a number of questions, on all of the different characteristics that we talked about, whether it be business capability, financial, background of the key officers and managers of the company, etc. So you'll find that at that link. You'll also need to provide proof of your incorporation, whether it's a certificate of incorporation, company articles, or the equivalent document from the jurisdiction in which you operate. Again, if you recall, I mentioned the liquid capital requirement of $70,000 US. That documentation needs to be provided prior to completion of the accreditation process. And finally, a copy of the insurance policy that we also said is required. Now, again, if you do not currently have the insurance and you want to apply for the accreditation and get your approval first, we will allow that, but you need to provide a letter or some other documentation from the insurance company saying that you are eligible for the insurance, and that once we approve you, we will then approve you, saying conditional upon you providing us proof that you've entered into the insurance arrangement. So in other words, you don't have to actually go out and buy the insurance until you know you've been approved. So just step by step, the first thing that happens is you submit the application and you pay the application fee. We review the application for approval. We follow up with conducted with the applicant for further information or to clarify application answers. Also in here, but not really detailed because it's not something you need to do, but we also conduct a variety of background checks and so forth at this point, so that we're comfortable that your entity is one that we can enter into a contract with. Once we approve the contract, once we approve the application, we will send you a copy of the contract for you to sign, along with an invoice for the first year accreditation fee, which is the $4,000. You must return the signed contract and the $4,000 fee before and satisfy any other outstanding requirements, such as proof of insurance. And once you've done all of that, we sign the contract, send you back a copy. We announce the fact that you've been accredited to the registries. You are then able to go in and contact the registries and say, I've been accredited, now I want to start selling your registrations. Miscellaneous advantages to being ICANN accredited. This is not something that my department runs, but I want to mention it, and that is that the ICANN registrar constituency is a body within the ICANN community structure, and that body has the formal role of representing registrars in policy formation within ICANN. Now, if, as a reseller, you wouldn't have this opportunity, but as a registrar, you do have the opportunity to become a part of this constituency, which then allows you to have a direct impact on the rules and regulations that may affect your business, and that you can network and learn from an exclusive set of other registrar businesses from around the world. So that's one of the advantages from ICANN's perspective. And with that, I'm just going to put my contact information up here. Again, if you need or want a copy of this set of slides, you can send it to my email address there, or contact Logic Boxes. They'll be able to refer that to me as well. And with that, I'm going to turn control back over to Sandeep, and he'll take it from here.
Hey, Tim, while you do that, would you mind if I asked a couple of quick questions?
Sure.
Okay, so here are a couple. We have one here about, I guess, somebody's asking whether they're under the impression that amounts payable to ICANN from the registrar varies whether you do or do not monetize expired domains. I think that you might have mentioned that a little bit in terms of the variable rate for smaller registrars and whether they're active in the drop pool. You may have been talking about something else there, but I guess the question was basically, is there a different rate for registrars that don't attempt to monetize expired domains?
No, we don't look at the expired domains in terms of your fees. It's the drop catching aspect, which has to do with how many requests for ads versus how many actual ads you make. So it's at the front end, not at the back end of the registration process that we look at. I'm not sure if that's clear. I mean, drop catching involves going in and trying to get a name that has been deleted and registering it. And sometimes folks will pool many different many different accreditations to maximize their access to the drop pool and to collect names, which means that your registrar might be sending hundreds of ad requests into the registry and only on occasion register a name. If you're involved in that activity, you would not be eligible for the reduced quarterly fees.
Okay. And there was another question here about just, it's a quick one about sort of what's the average sort of time that the application process would take for the accreditation?
Well, the last few I approved, it was 10 days, but we generally say 30 days, but a big part of that is up to the applicant themselves, because it depends on how complete the application is. If we have questions and come back to you, or if we need additional information and request it of you, our biggest delays happen in the turnaround time between our asking for something and getting it back from the applicant. But under normal circumstances, we target for, and we have a pretty good track record in the last couple of years of 30-day turnaround.
Okay. Another question we have here, I think I'll make this the last one before we move on, is you mentioned that there's not really an ICANN constituency for resellers. And the question was, I guess, are you or is anyone from Logic Boxes aware of any sort of effort to create a constituency from among resellers, or is that just a possibility?
Well, the definition of reseller is pretty broad. I can be an attorney representing an intellectual property client, and I might register domain names on behalf of them for new products they want to introduce. Does that make me a reseller? Maybe it does. But resellers come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and some of them have contracts with registrars, and some of them, there may be hosting providers or web designers that just go out and register names for their customers, but they keep them in their name. It would be difficult to imagine a constituency group representing the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of resellers out there, plus the multiple different kinds of models. But I don't know, Sandeep may have something to add on that.
Yeah, it's really very difficult, right? Because of how distributed the set is. I mean, you're really talking about web hosting companies, you're talking about domain resellers, you're talking about intellectual property consultants, you're talking about ISP telcos possibly. So I think, when the set is that large, it's very hard to build a constituency that can actually adequately represent the interests of various subsets within that group. So I think that's the real challenge.
Okay, well, I think that probably answers the question pretty well. Do you guys want to carry on from there, and we'll save the rest of the questions for the end?
Sounds good. I'll turn it over to Sandeep. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Tim. All right, so the next section, what we're doing is actually just doing some number crunching, actually, trying to see how much does the ICANN accreditation cost and how much does it save on an annual basis. So moving right to the next slide, it's taking a sample of 15,000 as the number of domain names that you're managing and growing at 15% per annum. At that, you're saving about $15,000 in terms of registration costs, and that's growing. In addition to that, if you're monetizing certain opportunities, as we mentioned, which is, let's say, transfer fulfillment or domain parking, we've taken an estimate of $5,100 being added to that. And this estimate is actually based on specific examples and registrars that are actually leveraging this opportunity at a certain scale are actually making this kind of money. So that totals up to $19,000 or close to $20,000 in terms of direct savings that the ICANN accreditation can bring you. But let's also not forget that the registry promos are actually presenting a very, very interesting opportunity. And a conservative estimate would be for any average registrar to save at least another $10,000 from these registry promos. So putting everything together, the number is actually close to about $30,000 that a reseller would save at 15,000 domains as their volume, which is more or less about $2 every domain name. That's fairly sizable. Now, bear in mind that this would change dramatically based on domain volumes, and we get the question a lot as to what is the magic number of domain names I need to have in order to start looking at ICANN accreditation. The fact is that there is no such magic number. It really depends a lot on your current focus, what you buying domain names at currently, how your hosting business is set up, what geos are you targeting. So the various factors that actually play into the equation, and we can suggest a way in which you can actually find that out through some assistance from consultants that we have specifically for that purpose. I'd also like to add that these estimates can actually go higher if you have the eye as far as these promos are concerned. They are available widely across all TLDs. So if you have someone focused trying to optimize and leverage each of these opportunities, your savings would actually be much higher. All right, so the next section, we're going to cover how logic boxes can help aspiring ICANN accredited registrars. Before we get to that, I must give you a quick background and introduction to the Logic Boxes company. So Logic Boxes is a part of the DirectEye group. DirectEye, as a group, owns and operates several businesses within the web services industry. And that includes webhosting.info, Reseller Club, Skenzo, and Logic Boxes. Logic Boxes is noted to be a pioneer of this industry and has been operating this business for over 8 years. We've had a 100% success rate in ICANN accreditation applications, and we've actually accredited over 10% of all the currently accredited registrars. So the service is actually very, very popular. Logic Boxes also provides registrars with a platform, a gateway, so to speak, to connect with all the GTLDs. So registrars don't have to independently connect with all the GTLDs and spend development effort in doing that. And through the service, we're actually powering over 5 million domain names spread across 90 odd ICANN accredited registrars. We are currently the market leaders of this space with over 55% market share, and some of our most prominent clients include the likes of HostGator, UK2, and Alentis. So next slide, we're actually going to be taking you through a roller coaster ride of what it's like to actually go through the ICANN accreditation process. Now bear in mind what Tim said, there actually isn't too many delays in the ICANN accreditation process if you create the perfect application, or if your application is complete in every sense, and that ICANN doesn't have to come back to you with any questions or corrections. But if you're going to do this for the first time, the chance of you creating a perfect applications are next to nothing, because there is a learning curve involved. Even if you spend a lot of resources in researching the process, because you're doing it the first time, you're not going to get it right. So the entire process is going to end up looking more like this. Iterations mean more delay, which more work on your side to actually get through the process. And keep in mind the last section of this process. Even if once you get ICANN accredited, you do have a lot of work involved in actually going through the process. Each registry, a lot of paperwork involved, some testing involved. In fact, you'd have to write a test code to connect to the registry servers, and I think coding effort involved in that would be at least a week or two before you can actually finally go live as an ICANN accredited registrar. So that actually comes to anywhere up to 6 months of effort. That's right from the time you get started on researching the ICANN accreditation process to completing the post-accreditation process, signing up with all the registries, connecting with them, and then finally getting started. This is 6 months of time and effort that you could otherwise have spent in focusing on your core business. Now, how does Accreditation.com, which is the consultancy services of Logicboxes, help you get through this ICANN accreditation maze? We streamline the process. By the virtue of actually having done this 100 times before, we have a very, very streamlined process. We're trying to perfect the accreditation application so that there are absolutely no iterations in the process, and the process goes through the shortest path possible and gets completed in the shortest time possible. What's more, it doesn't require any effort from the client side. Apart from the basic level of information that we need about your business, which is provided through a questionnaire, and obviously some documentation to support your application, we handle the entire application process from that point onwards. Even it goes even so far as to completing the technical tests with the registries on your behalf and also carrying out the paperwork on your behalf. And as a result, we've seen this entire process turn around in about 2 months. So that saves you a lot of time, effort, and money that you otherwise can spend in focusing on your core business. With that, I'd like to take you through a brief summary and conclusion of this presentation. So as you've learned today, the ICANN accreditation has several benefits. Apart from increasing domain name sales and also improving sales on the hosting side, there are strategic advantages like enhancing your brand image, giving you more control and security, and depending on your volumes and certain considerations, it can happen at a lower cost. In addition, it also brings to you several new revenue generation opportunities. These opportunities are only available to registrars. As resellers, your registrars making this money off you. It also gives you increased reach and market presence through increased marketing funds. It also helps you develop a reseller channel that you can also leverage for your hosting business. Lastly, partnering with the specialists in this business will help you lower cost, shorten time to market, and obviously, very importantly, is avoid opportunity cost. Removing people from your core business of hosting and getting to work on something like this as a side project is not necessary when you do have specialists in this business whose job it is to actually take you through this process at a cost-effective rate. In addition, I must make this disclaimer that ICANN accreditation isn't a magic pill to several problems, and it doesn't help in each and every case. You need to do your due diligence, you need to work out the numbers, and make an informed decision. And we can help you do that. We can do a feasibility study specifically keeping your business in mind and tell you how much it would cost for you to get ICANN accredited and whether it would save you money or it would cost you more money to go down that path. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for making time out for attending today's presentation. I can tell that we can actually offer you free cost-benefit analysis to tell you whether it makes sense for you to go down this path. And if you are interested in going through the accreditation, our accreditation service is actually completely free of cost. So you can get started with the process by visiting this URL, giving us basic information for us to carry out cost-benefit analysis. Send us an email with any queries. You can also get in touch with me directly. We'll also be attending several conferences over the next couple of months. So we're actually the gold sponsors for the Parallels Conference next month. And we'll also be at the Silicon Valley attending the ICANN meeting in March, followed by the World Hosting Day Summit also in March. And with that, I'd like to conclude the presentation. Thank you so much, Tim, for making time out to attend this presentation and sharing valuable feedback from ICANN's perspective. And Liam, you've been instrumental in making this happen. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we've got a few minutes left that we could spend answering a few more questions, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, I think you sort of suggested at the top of the slide there that, excuse me, that the certain aspects of dealing with logic boxes are going to be free. There were a few questions about what exactly somebody can expect to pay to logic boxes when they're going through that process.
Sure, I can clarify that. So it's effectively free. So with a consultancy service, we also bundle in the registrar platform. So when you pay a consultancy fee to us, it's actually going to come back to you when you start using the platform. So it's more like a deposit that you pay for using a registrar platform as opposed to a fee that sort of goes away once you completed the consultancy service. So that's the basic model in which we work.
And is the cost of that sort of based on the volume of business they're doing?
It's based on several factors, such as the amount of time and effort that we project in terms of carrying out that application. Volumes definitely plays a role. And there are a couple of other factors that go into the process for us to come up with the exact fee involved or deposit involved in going through the process with us. But we're trying to make this a cost-saving exercise. So audience can be rest assured that they'll only end up saving time and money through the process if they compare to the time and effort that they would invest in doing it themselves.
Okay, I have a feeling that based on how variable that is, if somebody wants to get a better sense of what that might cost or what they might end up paying to use the platform, I think maybe that they can follow up with you directly outside the webinar. Somebody was asking if there's an opportunity to save money by buying an existing registrar.
I wouldn't recommend that option because that registrar could come with a lot of baggage. There could be litigations on the registrar. We don't know what the registrar is being used for, so you'd have to do a lot of research. And if you end up spending that time and actually sending your own application, you might find that is actually a faster process than buying an existing registrar. So if you're getting a registrar that's shell, that's completely clean, doesn't have any baggage, you might want to consider that. But I still consider, or rather recommend, going through a fresh ICANN accreditation process because that can, happen fairly quickly as well.
Okay. This is a question from sort of referencing something that we were talking about much earlier in the presentation. But with Sandeep, when you were first talking, you were talking about how, and although this might be a question that both of you guys will have some input on the answer to, but Sandeep, when you were talking earlier about the sort of the potential for a registrar to sort of monetize domains post-expiry, somebody asked about, because you were talking about it as being sort of a stable situation, isn't there some sort of debate going on within the policy community on that might change policy regarding to expired domains, and how might changes to that policy brought about by that work affect the potential for monetization or the amounts related to monetization?
Sure, yeah, and I mean, to my mind, I don't know of any specific policy discussion around this. I know there were some discussions, but they were inconclusive. So as of now, I don't see this opportunity going away, to be honest. And I think it's going to, even if it has to go away for certain reasons, I think it's going to take at least 9 months minimum for anyone to come up with the policy and then implement it. So it's safe to say for that for the foreseeable future, at least for the short term, that this opportunity is very much going to be there. And I'm not aware of any specific policy discussion around eradicating this process. I don't know, Tim, if you have anything else to share on this.
Well, yeah, I think you're mostly correct. There is a group that's looking at what they call post-expiration domain name recovery, I think is the term. But anyway, it's a group that there's a proposition that says that there are registrants today who are disadvantaged because their names expire and they didn't have a chance to renew them, and therefore there needs to be some opportunity after they expire for them to still renew them. And some of this is triggered, I guess, by some of the post-expiration activities, as you mentioned in your presentation. Early on, there were some pretty aggressive, and they've backed off some of that, I think. But in any event, that group is still debating different possibilities that might include some sort of period of time after a name expires where some action is taken to try to make sure that the original registrant knows that it has expired and has the opportunity to renew it. But beyond that, and again, I don't think that would probably involve a policy development process that could take many months. But even that would not preclude. That would only address a short period of time immediately following expiration, I believe. But again, I don't think anything has been decided about that, and there's no clear consensus at this point in time that I'm aware of about that. So, to the best of my knowledge, there's no active policy consideration that would impact the post-expiration period at this time.
Okay. There's a few questions here from. I'm going to lump them all into one question, basically, but there are a few questions, basically. I'm from somebody from Pakistan and somebody from Iran saying, is that going to impact, is that going to impact my potential to become accredited? Or how might it impact that, or the time that it'll take? Are there any geographic restrictions or any geographic influences?
We have to look at those on a case-by-case basis. I can't really say in absolute terms.
Okay. Let's see. This is a question that I'm afraid that my own sort of lack of complete understanding of the registry, policy is going to show through here, but somebody's asking if they'd like to know if the registrar pays a fee to restore a domain name in RGP. I'm afraid I don't know what that means.
Yes, well, I think the registrar, there is an increased fee. When registries, and again we're talking VeriSign, Affiliates, or what have you, if they permit RGP, which is a redemption grace period, this is a period after the 45 days post-expiration, there is an optional ability to provide for redemption of a domain name by the original registrant at that time. And those registries that do make that optional opportunity available do charge an increased charge to the registrar to renew names at that point. And the registrar is free to charge whatever they want to their customer to do that. So there is there's nothing governing it other than to say that there is an added expense to the registrar, and that usually gets passed on to the registrant.
That's right, and just to add to that, that cost is approximately 6 to 8 times the general cost the registry charges. So if the registry charges $6, the redemption cost is anywhere between $36 to $48 generally. That's what we've seen.
Okay. I think we're pretty close to the end of the hour here. I'll just ask one more question. Somebody had asked if it's not totally clear what they're asking, but I think the question is, does LogicBoxes have any services relating to non-ICANN accreditation, such as CCTLDs?
So yes, I mean we do support several CCTLDs, but that's not our core focus. but there are a lot of CCTLEs that we do actually help you with. So I'd like to, hear more about which CCTLEs that person is interested in, and I can respond accordingly.
Okay, well, maybe folks who have questions related to that or any other further questions can follow up with you, Sandeep. Your contact info is on the screen. I'm afraid we're out of time, but again, if there are questions that were submitted that didn't get addressed in the webinar, I think that we'll have them a record of them, and we can follow up with them via email or other means, I guess. I'd like to thank everyone for attending, submitting a bunch of great questions. Of course, I'd like to thank Sandeep and Tim for shedding some light on a process that, I think is very interesting to a lot of us and probably not as well understood as it could be. I'd also like to remind everyone that this session will be archived next week along with a lot of other great webinars at theword.com/webinars. Thanks again to everyone, and everyone have a great day.